Good morning. Happy Sabbath. We're going to start our day with prayer, and so if you'll bow your heads with me, we'll pray right now. Dear Jesus, thank you so much for Sabbath. Thank you for this day. Thank you for the kiddos that are joining us via the internet and their parents and families and whoever else is joining us. We just thank you that we can still reach each other in this way. And we just help you to, or ask you to bless our day and help us to have a good Sabbath. Thank you and amen. Well, you guys, we're going to talk a little bit today about people and how they talk to one another, how they treat one another, and we're gonna start with what people say, and really we're going to focus on what people say to one another. And when I talk about what people say to one another, a lot of times, especially growing up, kids sometimes say some really mean things, and adults do too. We don't want to leave the adults out because there's definitely some adults that say things that aren't nice. So we're going to put some things on the board, and there are going to be some not nice things, maybe some ugly words, not too bad, but we're going to write some things on the board, and you can think of some at home. If I don't get ones that you're thinking of still, you can kind of picture those in your head and pretend I wrote them up on the board. But we're going to start out with some that I came up with that I know. I've actually heard kids talk like this to one another, and it makes my heart sad. And I know that if it makes my heart sad, it's making God's heart sad. So we're going to first start with that. So guys, we're going to talk about what are some ugly things or some naughty, mean things that people have said to each other, maybe even to you. Some mean things. Have you ever heard anybody say a mean thing to you? Maybe you've heard someone say, "You are not my friend." So I'm going to write this one up here. I'm hoping you guys can see these. You are not my friend. I hear this one a lot. Have you guys ever heard that one? It's not a very nice thing to say, is it? Because we like to have friends. So you are not my friend. That is not a nice thing to say. What about, this one's really mean. Have you heard this one? You're ugly. That is really mean. That's not a nice thing to say to someone. How about, I don't like you. I don't like you. Does that make you feel good? That would make me sad if someone said that to me. What about this one? What if someone tells you, you don't belong? You don't belong. Do you know what that means? That means like they may not want you to be in their friend group, or maybe they feel like you don't belong in their family or in their school or in their church. You don't belong. It's a very sad feeling to feel like you don't belong. So it's not a nice thing to say to one another. What about if someone says, I don't want you? What about that? I don't want you. I don't think we hear this one too much. I hope not. I don't want you. That's a mean thing to say. We don't want to say that to our friends. What if they're talking about themselves to make you feel bad? That's not very nice either. What about they say, I'm better than you? I'm better than you. If I say I'm better than you, now I'm saying that you're not very good, right? And that I am better than you. Does that mean that I'm worth more than you? I'm better than you. That is not a nice thing to say. I'm better than you. What if someone says I'm smarter than you? Is that a nice thing to say? It's okay if someone is smarter than us, but it's not nice to say it, right? We don't want to make someone feel bad by saying I'm smarter than you. So I'm going to put it up there. It may not necessarily be super mean to say, but it's not a nice thing to say. I'm smarter than you. These are not nice things to say. I hope you guys don't talk like this to your friends or people you call your friends, because talking like this isn't very friendly, is it? These are some really, really sad things to say to one another, and they're really sad things to think. What if you actually think that you're better than someone else? Does that make that person no good? It probably makes them feel no good. It's not a very nice thing to say. What does Jesus say about us and to us? Does Jesus say any of these things? I don't think he would ever say any of these things, ever, and he feels so sad when you guys say it to each other. What does Jesus say? When we say stuff like this, I know that Jesus tells us things like, you are worthy. So if we say you don't belong or I'm better than you, Jesus is telling us you are worthy. We're going to put it in black because Jesus is talking to us. You are worthy. Can you read that? That's what Jesus said. It's nice and black so we can see it. I hope you can see it. You're worthy. That's what Jesus says. What about if we feel like someone is better than us or someone is more important than us? What does God say to us? Jesus says, you are important. He made us, so he knows. So if he knows that you are important, then I hope you believe it. Jesus says, you are important. Right? And why does he tell us these things? He made us and he knows we're worthy. He knows we're important. But most of all, what he wants us to know about us is that he loves us, right? And so his main thing that he wants us to know is, I love you. So let's do a nice big one right here. I love you. This is what God is saying, what Jesus is saying to us. I love you. Now, the things that Jesus says to us are nice, right? Those things make us feel good, and they make us feel worthy. And we know that God made us, and he wants us to feel good and feel worthy. And he wants us to know that he died for us, and he wouldn't die for nobody. He wants us to be with him in heaven. And so he believes that we need to be kind to one another and love one another the way he loves us. But when he speaks to us, through all the things that other people are saying, is it easy to see what God says to us? I'm going to back up a little bit and let you look at the board. It's kind of jumbly. There are definitely things God's telling us, but mixed in are these things that are mean, the things other people are saying. And sometimes it's hard to see what God's saying or to hear what God's saying when we have so many other people saying bad, mean things to us. So what I want you guys to know is that when Jesus comes again, he's going to wipe away sin. Sin is what makes people be ugly to one another. It's what makes people feel mean and be hurtful to one another. And if sin is gone, all that's left is what God says to us. So we're going to wipe it away, just like when Jesus comes again. I hope this works. When Jesus comes again, he's going to wipe away sin, and all that's going to be left, I sure hope, is what Jesus says to us. All those ugly things are going to be wiped away because Jesus is going to come again. He died for us, and this is all he wants us to know, that we are worthy, we are important, and he loves us. So it doesn't matter what people say about you. God loves you. He wants you in heaven with him. Be kind to one another. Use your words in a loving way, and Jesus will be happy with you, okay? Let's be kind to one another. Let's have prayer, and we will close, and you can watch your lesson. Dear Jesus, thank you so much for Sabbath. Thank you for these kids. Help them to remember these lessons and to be kind to one another. And remember that we are all your children, and you want us to love one another and be kind with our words and our actions. And we just thank you so much for being with us, and we ask that you touch hearts and soften hearts and help people to be kind. Thank you so much. Help us to have a good week. Amen.
Hi everyone, it's Aunt Fernita. Today's story is called, What Is It? The memory verse is from Isaiah chapter 58, verses 13 and 14. If you call the Sabbath a delight, you will find your joy in the Lord. Today's message is we worship God when we enjoy keeping the Sabbath. Do you know what a desert is like? It is hot during the day and cold at night, with all the sand and little or nothing growing. Where could you find food in a desert? The Israelites traveled in the desert and they were almost out of food. What do you think they did? God took such good care of the Israelites. He sent a cloud to shade them from the hot desert sun in the day. He sent a pillar of fire at night to light their camp. He had freed them from Egypt and destroyed their enemies in the Red Sea. But the Israelites were beginning to worry. It had been 6 weeks since God had led them out of Egypt, and the food they had brought with them was almost gone. "Back in Egypt, we had all the food we could eat," they grumbled. "But here in this desert, we're going to starve to death." They complained bitterly to Moses. Of course, God had no intention of letting them starve to death. "I will rain down bread from heaven," God told Moses. "It will be there in the morning. The people are to go out every day and gather an omer each, but they must not keep any of it until the next day. I am going to test them to see if they follow my instructions." Sure enough, the next morning the ground was covered with thin white flakes. The people were surprised. "What is it?" they asked, again and again. It looked like frozen dew all over the ground. "This is the bread God promised you. Gather it and eat it today, but don't try to keep any for tomorrow. It won't be good." So the people called it manna, which means, "What is it?" They gathered it up and tasted it. It tasted sweet like honey, and there was enough for everyone. But as soon as the sun grew hot, the manna that remained on the ground melted away. Some people gathered a lot. Some people gathered a little. All the people had just what they needed regardless of how much they gathered. "Don't keep any of it until the next morning," God had said. But some of them paid no attention. The next morning their leftover manna was full of worms and smelled bad. On the 6th day, the instruction was different. "Today you're going to gather twice as much," Moses said. "Tomorrow is God's Sabbath, a day of rest. There won't be any manna on the ground in the morning. So get enough for today and bake it or boil it, but save some of it for tomorrow." The double portion they were told to gather to keep for Sabbath would not get wormy. But wouldn't you know, some people didn't gather twice as much that Friday. Instead, they got up on Sabbath morning expecting to find manna. They had to learn their lesson the hard, hungry way. Of course, there was no manna on the ground that Sabbath morning, and there was none on any Sabbath that came after. "How long will they refuse to follow my instructions?" God sighed to Moses. The story of the manna teaches us 2 things. First, just like the Israelites, we honor God when we obey Him. Following His directions is an act of worship. It also teaches us that God knows best. His plans for us are for our own good. Following His instructions is the only way to really be happy. It took the Israelites a while to learn that they needed to follow God's instructions about the manna. They finally got it right. And it's a good thing, because that's what God fed them for the 40 years they spent in the wilderness. They also learned how important the Sabbath is to God. He wanted them and us to make it a special day, different from other days. When they kept the Sabbath special, when they didn't work by gathering manna, they were showing God their love and obedience, and they were really worshiping Him.